Okay, I'm sitting here in the studio with Bill Schnee. Bill is one of the finest engineer producers I've ever worked with, and we spent a great deal of time with Jeff Porcaro. And I just thought we'd sit here and talk about Jeff and the impact he's had on all of our lives. And take it, Bill. It's all yours.
Yeah, quite an impact. So many things. After Jeff's passing, a Japanese magazine did a little documentary on him, and there was mostly family and whatnot. And I know I was the only engineer producer that was in it. I don't remember about the musicians, but it was really rough writing that at the time because it was so close to his passing. And interestingly enough, when Lee contacted me the other day and said, "Why don't you do one of these?" I went and got some of the points out of it and literally started tearing up again.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, and here I go again.
It's tough. It's real
and here
hard.
I go again. I can't believe it. So I'm gonna read this and try to not look like a total goof. I remember the first time someone told me about Jeff Porcaro. They said, "Boy, does this guy groove," and were they ever right? I had the pleasure of recording Jeff many times on things that I produced and on things that others produced. Trained by his wonderful father, he was the consummate professional. Always the first to a session, not just the first day when we got drum sounds, but every day thereafter. I also had the pleasure of becoming good friends with Jeff. Heck, when my wife Sally and I got pregnant for the first time, we got our gynecologist from he and Susan. Around late 1975 or 76, I was mixing in Sound Labs, and Jeff came running in with a cassette, you all remember those, of what he and David Page had done the night before at Davlin to show me what kind of grooves and what they were doing. That, of course, was the beginning of Toto. That excitement he showed for music, whosever it was one of his many strong suits. I remember that excitement several years later when he brought in an LP of Ricky Lee Jones' first album that he had only played on one cut, but he was so incredibly excited about how talented she was, wanted me to hear the whole album. He was one of the most giving musicians I've ever seen, always wanting to help anybody else. Several times I had this sort of problem with Jeff. One time I was producing a single for Geffen Records on some band, and it's funny, I remember Geffen Records, I don't remember the name of the band. The A&R person had said, the band's drummer's not very good, you're going to have to get someone else, so I had gotten Jeff. After we got the drum sounds, I played him the previous version that they had done, and Jeff insisted that the kid go out and try it. And of course, now the poor kid was more nervous than ever with Jeff in the control room and watching him. But he went through several takes, and then Jeff went out and nailed it on the first one. Like many great drummers, Jeff would get his groove super quick, and then he would patiently play it as many times as it took for the rest of the band to coalesce. Lee, of course, was right there with him on the first take. When my studio was almost complete, I called Jeff and asked him if he would bring the guys' Toto down to hear what my room sounded like. We put down a few rough tracks of what eventually became Toto 4. We cracked a bottle of bubbly, and Jeff gave a really sweet toast to the room. Several years later, he asked me to do his instructional video in the room. But I also loved his incredible wacky side. We all know the stories of peeing in Jay Graydon's gig bag or walking out on the Ricky Lee Jones session. He was incredibly loving and giving, but would not let anyone disrespect him. What really blew my mind is that I had just been to his house a week or so before he passed because we were working on a live to 2-track percussion album. There was only one, and there'll never be another.
Absolutely, absolutely. Love that man dearly. I miss him.
Wow.
But I'm glad to be here with you and that we're still in this together.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everybody look at, here's Bill's studio here, and this is still one of the finest rooms in Los Angeles. Whenever I get called to come here, I just go crazy. The walls of shame here.
That you started.
Yeah, it was all my fault. This room was never painted, and at the last minute they painted it, and I was so happy they painted it white that I came in here, and you can barely see it anymore. I wrote, "It's about time you painted this room." Thank you, Bill.
You bet, Lee.